It's safe to say that many journalists were enamored by the Alfa Tonale when it first launched. So much so, it was even a finalist in the SA Car of the Year competition. And who can blame us? I mean, look at this thing. It is gorgeous. But today, we want to find out how well this car does in the real world. So one thing I do enjoy about this Tonale is the fact that it's a hybrid. And when you are, just milling about at a very low speed, the car will simply cruise in EV mode. But the moment you get going, then the engine starts to kick in. We know that in South Africa, it's important to rather have a hybrid over an electric vehicle, especially for customers who are still getting in tune with this concept of alternative power. I enjoy just how driver-focused it is from a chassis perspective. The moment you turn a corner with this car, it feels like an Alfa. It's got that exciting nature about it, it feels dynamic, and it feels like it wants to be driven. But that doesn't necessarily translate to the engine that this vehicle has got. It is powered by a 1.5-litre turbocharged engine. It produces 118 kilowatts and 214 Newton meters. Decent torque for a small car such as this. However, I personally don't enjoy the lag that this vehicle has, so when you want the power and you put your foot down, the car takes a second to register and you have to wait, and then all of a sudden you've got a burst of torque. So I do wish that Alfa had calibrated this engine to be a bit smoother and feel a bit more synchronized when it comes to your day-to-day driving experience. In the city is where you feel that on and off nature of this vehicle. But when you're out and about like this, you do start to enjoy the car a bit more, and that is where the Alfa character comes into play. The benefits, however, of having this engine is the fact that you benefit from a fuel economy perspective. This car is set to average 5.7 liters per 100 kilometers, which is very good, but naturally you won't get that perfect fuel consumption figure. I would say anything between the mid-6s to the low 7s, which again isn't bad at all. One thing I would love to praise about this car is the gearbox. If you've driven previous iterations of the Alfa automatics, you'll know that those weren't great at all. Whereas with this car, I've got a 7-speed dual clutch system, and if I put this car into the dynamic mode and I start using the paddles, it's incredible just how responsive this gearbox is. And it's quite nice to feel nice metal tabs like this that I can just go up a gear and then down a gear, and each time I select a gear, it's bang on. It being an Alfa, it does benefit from being very dynamic, but the trade-off to that is that this vehicle's suspension setup is quite firm, and we are riding on 20-inch wheels with low-profile tires. So even on a smoothish road such as this, I do feel the small bumps that do translate onto my bottom and onto the steering wheel. So if you're not really into the harsh ride that you can expect from a more dynamic Alfa, then perhaps you'd want to opt for a slightly smaller wheel option or maybe even thicker tires. I do find that finding certain menus and options in this vehicle is not easy, and I'm not an older person that is averse to technology and how things like that work. But I have had to spend a bit of time just trying to find the fuel economy figure on this car. It is very much Alfa from that perspective, in that it can be a little bit complicated. For the first time, we've got an Alfa that on the outside looks the part, but on the inside is very much focused on the normal consumer. They love the look and feel of this car. So perhaps us journalists are the crazy ones, but it's also a reminder for us to realize that what the petrol head wants versus what the normal consumer wants are vastly different things at times. And I think that this is one of those vehicles that will do well from a consumer perspective, and I'm hoping that it does do that, because Alfa does need a car that appeals to the masses as opposed to a small amount of petrol heads out there. Another thing that I do think will appeal to many consumers is just how practical this car is. It may look sleek and small on the outside, but there's actually a decent amount of space in this vehicle for not only me as the driver, but also for my passengers, because it's quite frustrating to drive a crossover that's meant to be aimed at families, but then you can't do family things with the car. Whereas with this car, you can happily put your kids or the dogs and go for a nice weekend away and fill this boot and enjoy the Alfa life. I do like the appeal of this car. There's a certain character to it that not a lot of vehicles in this class have. While the Alfa Tonale may not be a perfect car, it makes up for its flaws through its smart hybrid system, its practical nature, and its astonishingly good looks. And while the latter may not seem that important, in the real world for a consumer, it counts for a lot.